Father Alexander, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Paul. How are you doing?
I am good. And you?
I'm trying to be okay. I'm wondering, should I call you Mr. Paul or Sheldon?
Sheldon is fine, Father. Sheldon is fine. But I would call you Father, right?
All right,
Sheldon is fine.
no problem
How
with that.
how was the weather in Sangre Grande?
As of now, it's okay. They call Grande the bathroom of Trinidad and Tobago because it's
Yeah.
always raining. But we
Okay.
have
Okay.
some sun at the moment.
Okay. That's good to hear, man. That's good to hear. Well, thank you for the time. I know you're busy. Thank you for being part of Shift. And for all the guys that are out there listening, I just want to reintroduce the whole Shift concept. Shift came out of the whole situation within the pandemic where a lot of users actually were forced to work from home. So we took the time to have people understand that there are different levels of wireless communications within environments. And the traditional or home-based Wi-Fi technology is being pushed so hard now that in many situations, it's not able to deliver on what it's being asked to deliver.
Yeah.
The heavy video, the increase in users, the remote sessions, and so on. So the awareness that we're trying to bring to people is that there is a shift required, right? The understanding that we see needed out there is that there is a difference.
Yes.
Commercial grade Wi-Fi to what the traditional home user has. And we wanted to reach out to you primarily because we know you embody that, right? I mean, we've recently done a deployment for you, so we know you saw that need, all right? But
Yes, definitely, definitely.
before we go into that though, I would like you to properly introduce yourself and have our viewers understand who you are and what you're responsible for.
Okay, great. So, my name is Father Stephan Alexander. I'm a Roman Catholic priest and a priest working and living within the cluster of parishes which are in Sangre Grande and Coryal. Personally, I manage 5 churches within the parish of St. Martin de Porres, Coryal, and there are 4 churches in the parish of St. Francis of Assisi, Sangre Grande. So I live in Sangre Grande and commute to Coryal almost daily to deal with the pastoral and sacramental responsibilities of the faithful of God in that area, but also of all people who live in those areas. Anyone has access to the church and the priest. And as you mentioned, pandemic, one of those things we've been doing in the church is providing assistance, social needs, hampers, etc. So we've been doing that in these areas. And that's a huge part of what I do in terms of being a priest. We celebrate sacraments, the masses. We do so many different things for the spiritual and the social care and upkeep of the people in the areas where our churches are.
Okay. And how
Yeah.
does technology play a role in the delivery of all these parish operations for you guys?
Well, technology for us is quite important because a lot of what we do, and this is even before the pandemic hit, was to use technology as a means of communicating with people. Not everyone comes to church. Some of them just can't. And some of them really just not into church. And, sometimes you catch someone on a live feed or you catch them in a particular way, whether it's through sending emails or a video recording, something like that. Sometimes you catch someone and they see and they are attracted and they experience God in that way and seek to come to the church. So we use technology from that perspective. We also use it from the perspective of generating a lot of the facilities that we do, a lot of our data collection, because in order to deal with hampers and stuff, something just like that, we utilize products, online products that help us to do data collection. So a lot of our forms are online. I use mobile devices so that I can walk around and anywhere within our area and have access to technology so that I can complete forms. A lot of people in these areas and churches tend to deal with a lot of older persons.
Okay.
They don't have that ability to do it on their own. So I would need, and the persons who work with us, to have access so that we
Okay.
can upload information online, so that we can give information, always have it at our fingertips if someone asks for something. in that kind of a vein, rather than paper storage and everything else,
Correct, correct.
which is becoming a little bit more and more outdated. Whilst we still have it, we also are looking at digitizing um, a lot of our resources.
Okay, so I want to address something, Father, because I know a lot of people viewing this may be asking themselves, I mean, are priests really involved in technology? I mean, I know different because I've dealt with you before and I've seen some priests, and initially I was amazed at the amount of technology and devices you all use.
Yes.
You want to give us an idea? I mean, I know you are tech savvy, but I know you also work with other priests and so on. What's this thought process about, you all not being involved in technology and so on?
Well, a lot of priests, at least the visible face of priesthood that we see, is generally older men. So there are a few of us who are younger, and some would look at the gray in my beard and say that I am heading on the older side as well. But some of us are younger, and we, to a certain extent, grew up in the technological age
Correct.
as well. And we also don't have the fears that some persons have in terms of engaging technology. So you find that we open to learning and to using. And there is a motto that is quite familiar that a lot of people know and understand, that is, you don't reinvent the wheel.
Correct.
So one of the things we've recognized is that there are many programs and products out there online, from videos to movies to audiobooks to all kind of different things, that from a technological standpoint we can acquire, purchase, and reuse, rather than having to do everything ourselves and continuing to reuse and redo. So, for instance, some of our programs, catechesis is the process of teaching the faith. And for catechesis, we use programs created sometimes all over the world, in the US, the UK, etc. Different video programs, books, online books, materials, etc. And as you said, the younger persons, because of our own training, because a lot of us, we trained overseas. So some training is done in Trinidad, some may be done overseas when you do further studies as well. So the exposure is quite great to that which is out there.
Understood. Understood.
Even if you don't travel, that exposure is still there, because as we know, globalization has made the world into one small community.
Right.
So that
Correct.
access is there. And the younger priests, we just as much into the Instagram and the other different social media things, perhaps not to the extent of others, but we still are very aware of these things
Yeah.
and use them.
And you use them I mean, as part of your strategy.
Correct.
And I also wanted to touch on, I mean, we've been to the parish office in Grande previously. As I mentioned before, we did a project for you recently, and you were having some issues with the wireless technology within that building,
Yes.
right? Could you give us an idea of some of the issues you were having?
Well, if I could describe it in one word, it seemed as if the devices and the usage that we required overloaded the actual infrastructure that we had. So, for instance, I have several devices that I use for several reasons. Um, we have three priests who live here, and the one who has the least devices has two, and that's a phone and an iPad. And
Correct. And
then
that surprised, I remember that surprised me when we did the survey. Yeah.
right. So, and then you find, like myself, I have a laptop, an iPad, two phones, because we use the phones for different purposes within the parish for some of our ministry. So, as we mentioned, social media. So, we have a phone dedicated to WhatsApp and to Instagram and to these kinds of stuff. So, you find that we needed that Wi-Fi connection. With three of us here, we're looking at close to 10 devices connected. Plus, this is including the office devices, which would have been the desktop and the laptop
Correct.
and stuff. So what we recognize is there was a bit of a lag. At times, there was a loss of connectivity if one moved from one area of the premises to the next. It is a two-story premises with fairly thick walls. Um, so we felt that there wasn't at times an even distribution of the signal at different areas in the house. So sometimes you'd be down in the office and you'd get fairly good reception. Otherwise, you may be up in a room in the chapel or somewhere, and you'd find that the connection is poor. Sometimes you'd be right in a room next to the office where you get very good connection, and you're fighting to load a video, which is a fairly easy process.
Yeah.
So that was part of what our issue was and why we contacted Blue for some assistance in terms of evaluating and then providing solutions for the issue.
And thanks for that, Father. I remember when we actually did this survey, we came back to you and we told you, very frankly, the devices that you had in place, though people may look at the building from outside, which is an inaccurate representation of what is inside, right? People may look at the building from outside, and when we looked at the survey, when we did the survey, we realized that the devices that you had in place just would not have been capable of delivering the requirements that you had.
Yes.
The multiple devices, the heavy video content required, and you also had meetings with some of your parishioners in a separate room. So
Correct.
there was a need for consistent video. And the lightest traffic you had within that parish office was browsing, but the
Correct.
majority of your traffic seemed to be video and instantaneous type traffic, like WhatsApp and
Correct.
so on.
Correct.
And after the evaluation of the existing platform and the survey, it just was not going to be able to deliver it. So fast forward to the implementation of the full enterprise level solution. And I want to make the differentiation here, because the solution you would have had in place would have been what we would have considered a consumer grade solution. Because,
Okay.
the average thought process is, well, Wi-Fi for your home should be sufficient for everything. But that's the shift that we are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
The needs that you have and your people who work in the parish office have, it's no longer traditional needs. It's no longer
Yes.
traditional needs. So you don't need traditional Wi-Fi
Solutions.
solutions.
Correct. Yes.
And when we spoke to you about that, you understood that.
Well, yes. So one of the things that I tend to do is to trust those who specialize. So after the evaluation was done and we saw what the issue was and a solution was recommended, it was just an issue of cost effectiveness to see whether or not we could manage that. And once we recognize that this is a priority for us because of the work that we do, then that became very little, a very little hurdle to surmount. So it's as you say, coming to recognize that the solution was the best approach going forward. And we have seen improvement, great improvement, at least in the initial stages, because when the solution was actually done, if I remember correctly, that happened before, probably about 2 months or so before the whole stay at home
Correct.
began.
Yeah, this was before
And
pandemic, yes.
so what occurred is that we had almost perfect service coverage because there were two units put up, um, upstairs, downstairs, etc., to share and to split the signal. I mean, you know the technical. I just go on what you have said to me, but that seemed to do very well. What we recognize along the way, however, is that as more and more people had to stay at home and more people
Yes.
started to use networks and network, I don't know if this is the right term, but the network solutions themselves seem to be overwhelmed with the amount of traffic on it.
Correct.
And then we recognize that we started to see small lags again, little blips in coverage. And it was not similar to what occurred before, but we recognize that, just as that shift, as you term it, had to be made, that even more shifts might need to be made
Correct.
now with more people even remaining home rather than going back out to work in the same way that they would have traditionally done.
Correct. So, and I remember when you had that conversation with me, because before you were not able to have access to any sort of reporting and so on. And when you mentioned to me that you were seeing drops and so on, after the deployment and in this stay-at-home period, we were able to actually check because the platform we implemented allowed you to actually see, have reports run. You were able to actually check to see whether or not you were having issues inside or at the internet level.
Yes.
Right? And we are determined that the actual internet links now were dropping as opposed to the Wi-Fi within the organization, within the parish hall.
Yes.
And in previous deployments, you would not have been able to make that differentiation. Those are not things that you traditionally get the ability to see with consumer grade or home level type Wi-Fi.
Yes.
And but my question, and I know you answered it, but my question for you is, after having gone through deployment and understanding that shift, can you say that you would have seen drastic improvement from what you would have had before to what you have now?
Definitely. So we use high-powered machinery here to the extent that we use pro models on most all the devices that we have. Because as you've mentioned, Sheldon, we do a fair amount of video editing as part of our production capabilities for our media and communications units, our portfolios. So we found ourselves having to do so much more of those things with persons being unable to go out. And even in the relaxing of some of these restrictions, going and producing content. So one of the contents that would have been produced is a series on the domestic church at prayer, which is about helping families to understand their own role as church, as the first example of prayer and of worship in their homes. And it was helping them to follow along with this series, which required a lot of video editing and content. The shortest one of those films, if I remember correctly, is something like 12, 13 minutes, and one goes even to upwards of an hour. So it's an ongoing series, and it's been filmed and edited and recorded for the most part. All the heavy machinery is being done right here in the parish.
Okay.
And so the ability for us to have steady connection, to upload whatnot, I know we would not have had we continued previously or had we gone to the home. So for instance, some of the technicians, the young men who help in creating these products for us, they come to the parish office and they do everything here.
That's good
Because
to know.
in order to do that at home, it would take them hours upon hours to get it done, where we have much quicker service, more consistent service here based on the products that we have been given. If given us the products which have been installed
Yes.
by Blue on our premises.
That's good to know, Father. That's good to know. Well, I mean, we're very happy that you understand the shift that we're trying to get people to see out there. Wireless networks are being pressured. They're being hit with requirements that are not traditional requirements, but those requirements that they're being hit with now are normal in the scheme of things. So, our approach to how we see wireless networks and what we deploy has to shift as well. So we really appreciate the time, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be of service to yourself and to the parish. So thank you very much for making this shift, Father. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sheldon, for having me and for helping me to make that shift, because without it, we would have been way behind.
Appreciate it. Anytime.
Take care. God bless.
God bless as well.
All right.